Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Linda J. Hansen, your host of the Prosperity 101 podcast, where we seek to unleash the power of employers to reclaim and preserve America by connecting boardroom to breakroom and policy to paycheck. Employers educating employees about public policy issues that affect their jobs can lead to greater employee loyalty, engagement, and retention, and to an increased awareness of the blessings and responsibilities of living in a free society. We help people understand the foundations of true prosperity, the policies of prosperity, and how to protect prosperity by becoming informed, involved, and impactful. To access our podcast library and resources, or to sign our Employers Unleashed pledge, visit prosperity101.com. Thank you so much for joining with me today. Today, my guest is a wonderful man, and who is someone who has been fighting for freedom for a long time in America. Before I introduce him, though, I just want to invite you to not only go to our website and look at all that we offer, but the new offering we have is our 3-point pledge, where you can take a pledge on just informing people in your workplace about the freedoms that made America great. So I invite you to go look at our 3-point pledge and possibly even join our Employers Unleashed community, where we learn how to impact our 7 mountains of culture, where you can learn more about that on the website, but our 7 mountains of culture through our businesses. So I encourage you and hope that you'll go to prosperity101.com and also check out our strategic partners there, the ones who help us keep this podcast on the air. But for the sake of time, I want to get right to our guest. My guest today is Frank Gaffney. He has been on the podcast before, and I know his information is always so relevant and so critically important. Frank is someone who has been fighting for freedom in America for decades, many decades. In fact, he was the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy under Ronald Reagan. This is someone who understands how to protect freedom in America. Right now, he is the president of the Institute for the American Future and the host of Securing America, which can be found on Real America's Voice Network. He also hosts a Secure Freedom Minute, which can be delivered to your inbox. So he'll tell you more about that. But today, our main topic is something of critical importance to not only people who live in Texas, but people all around America. And it involves our freedom and freedom for upcoming generations. Sharia law. So, Frank, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking time out to talk about this critically important, urgent topic. And we just so appreciate your insight and your studious approach to this whole issue, helping Americans understand why we would not want Sharia law in America and what is happening in Texas and other places, especially right now. So thank you, Frank. That's a long introduction, but thank you so much for being here. And please just introduce people to why this is so timely.
Thank you, Linda. It's great to be with you again. The timeliness arises from the fact that on the Republican primary ballot in the state of Texas, along with some hotly contested races, notably that of John Cornyn for re-election to the United States Senate, in which he's facing a very serious challenge from Ken Paxton, the current Attorney General. At the very bottom of this long 2-page ballot is a proposition. It's only 5 words long. It says, Texas should prohibit Sharia law. And this is of paramount importance, I believe, because Texas is in the process of being taken over by what I call Sharia supremacists, people who adhere to this I think it's properly described as a toxic, totalitarian, and actually demonic political ideology. It's masquerading as a religion, and by so doing, it gets in places like the United States of America, where we have a First Amendment right to religious freedom, it gets a pass, if not actually, in a sense, accommodated and condoned. And that would be a fatal mistake for it to become sort of embedded in our country, which is exactly what these adherents to Sharia have in mind for us, of course, as we see in Europe, where they've very far advanced that purpose. Parts of the Middle East, of course, Sharia is all over the place there. But they want to bring it here because if they can take down Texas, where I am at the moment, trying to fight this, they can take down America. And if they take down America, they will take down Western civilization as well. And again, that's their stated objective. Make no mistake about it.
Mhm. It truly is. And, when I first heard about Sharia law, it was when I was deputy chief of staff for Herman Cain's presidential campaign. And we met frequently with you and some of the people who worked with you. You gave me information to read. It really opened my eyes to the impact that Sharia law can have on individuals all across the world, but especially if we let it into America. And you bring up a really good point that because we have our First Amendment, because we want freedom of religion, this kind of seeps in through the cracks in the woodwork of that, in a sense that people think it is just part of another religion. Actually, it's like I've heard it said, we love Muslims, we just don't love Islam, right? And it is that the Sharia law application of how they walk out their faith is really incompatible with the West and truly incompatible with our constitutional republic. And if you could explain to the audience why Sharia law is so damaging to our freedoms, because they want to override our Constitution. And even now, there are Sharia courts in the US. And please explain about what's happening there, because I think a lot of people don't even know that this is all happening across the nation, and it's on the ballot in Texas for March 3rd.
It is. Let me just calibrate here. You use the term, we don't want it to seep into our country. It's here.
It's here.
Those courts in Texas are, there's at least two of them associated with mosques that are, I think, incorrectly understood to be houses of worship, kind of really like churches. They're much more than that. Going back to Muhammad's time, they're multi-use facilities, including, by the way, in at least some cases, as was true of this so-called perfect man, the Prophet Muhammad, they were used to store weapons and prepare for the use of weapons and to plan raids and jihadist attacks. So the fact that there are tribunals, as they call them, in these multi-use facilities that are now meting out justice, as they call it, according to Sharia, not according to the Constitution of the United States, not according to the laws of the state of Texas or others around the country, but according to Sharia. And why is that such a problem? Well, for starters, Article 6 of the Constitution says explicitly it is the supreme law of the land. And these adherents to Sharia say, no, 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 we're going to have our own supreme law, and the Constitution doesn't apply. And so you see in these tribunals women, notably children, being deprived of their process, their due process, their rights more generally under our Constitution. They may not even know they have those rights. And just to pick one example, if their husband says, I divorce you 3 times, that woman is divorced and she has no custodial rights over her kids. She may never see them again if he decides to take them away. I mean, and that's the least of it. I mean, the beatings of your wife that you are permitted to do in fact, really encouraged to do if they misbehave. The female genital mutilation that is commonplace within these communities. The barbaric, um, you know, stoning of people if a woman is accused of adultery without proof necessarily. That can result in stone. The honor killings, and these are happening in some cases. I don't know about stoning just yet, but some of these other practices are very much present in Texas right now. And what the jihadists, and I use that term explicitly because I believe that the people who embrace and adhere to Sharia embrace along with certain, the patina of religiosity. Which way do you pray? How often do you pray? What do you eat? Don't you eat? I mean, all of that stuff, the pietistic practices, if you will, are far inferior to the political ones. And the political ones are about how do you gain power?
Mhm.
Stealthily, if you can, at the moment, not use the more violent kinds, which are the preferred because they're the more efficient means of gaining power. But to get your hooks into a country and to, essentially force everyone else to submit. And submission, of course, is the literal meaning of the word Islam. To submit to Sharia is the object of the exercise. And you can't do it under our Constitution. In fact, you violate the Constitution in any number of ways and our laws more generally. So this is what's at stake in Texas at the moment and why I think this Proposition 10, as it's called, the very end of this primary ballot in the Republican primary, is so important. If overwhelmingly endorsed, and we're prayerful that's what will happen. If people know what Sharia entails and that it's not a religion, it is a totalitarian, demonic political ideology, they will overwhelmingly say, we're not going to do that in Texas. And if they do, we might, if we're lucky, get that resonating elsewhere in the country where it is also moving forward stealthily and inexorably.
It truly is moving forward across the country. And there's a couple things I want to go back to. One, you talked about how Sharia law views and treats women. And I'm so glad you did because we see so many people protesting in the streets and things. And I think of these young women who are supporting these ideologies and they really have no idea what that means for their life
Yeah.
in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And you talked about stoning. I actually read more recently about some instances of that, not here in America, the stoning, but in other parts of the world. It's horrible, not to mention child marriage. These young girls. Could you just mention that a little bit? So, listeners, as you are thinking about this, we have watched the news and seen everything about children being trafficked and the abuse of children. And I think the nation gets immune to it. And they don't realize the impact, the absolute impact, not only that it has on the individual child and the family, but then the cultural impact for generations of what has been allowed. So we cannot allow this in America. This is not how we want our children to be treated here or anywhere in the world. So could you explain a little bit about what they believe about child marriage?
Well, you need to back the lens up just a minute because what they profess to believe is that the Prophet Muhammad is, quote, the perfect man. His every utterance, his behavior, his directives are considered to be binding on everyone who follows him in Islam. And there are many aspects of what Muhammad did that would not only make him the exemplar you want anybody to follow, but is abhorrent in the extreme. One example is that he married a girl by the name of Aisha at the age of 6. And he is revered for having consummated the marriage when she was 9. Now, that's child rape. That's pederasty. That is despicable. And yet, it's what Muslims are told they must emulate. No, not everyone does, but a lot do. And you see these pictures out of places like Afghanistan where there's this 60-year-old grizzled, jihadist who's got a child next to him. Sometimes it's, by the way, it's boys, which is even worse. They dress them up as girls, but they're boys. And, the whole thing reeks of demonic behavior.
Mhm.
And the trouble is that it's bad enough that it is being practiced in other countries around the world, as you say. It's bad enough that they have made great inroads into places like Western Europe, one of the foundations of Western civilization.
Mhm.
But they're bringing all of this perfect man misbehavior into our country as well. And, you know, I think that if anybody in our country, with presumably the exception of, Sharia adherent Muslims, is offered this as the kind of model for our society and our culture and our way of life, they would be repudiated and rejected. And that's what we're trying to do with this ballot measure in Texas. It must be repudiated, it must be prohibited. But there are people in Texas, as well as elsewhere around the world, notably in places like Qatar and Turkey, where this agenda of Sharia supremacism, advanced notably by the Muslim Brotherhood, which, to his credit, the governor of the state of Texas said of the Muslim Brotherhood that it is a terrorist organization and a transnational criminal one at that, as is the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, which is its sort of leading henchman in
Mhm.
the front group universe. This is the sort of thing that has to be understood by Texans and rejected. And we have an opportunity on the 3rd of March, or really starting tomorrow with early voting, to make clear, not here, not in Texas, and not in America.
Not on our
Proposition
watch.
10.
Yeah, Proposition 10. So Texans should vote yes on Proposition 10, right?
Absolutely.
To ban Sharia law. And you said it isn't a law that they're putting into uh, practice with this proposition, but it's basically sending the message that this is not what we want. And
Right.
in addition to what you're talking about Sharia law, one of the things, and maybe I could have you back another time, we could talk about this more in depth. But one of the ways that they're infiltrating society is through our schools, and it's actually I've
Yes.
learned so much about how they're using school choice laws to be able to have their own charter schools that then they're just teaching this jihad mentality to their young people, and this anti-American, anti-Christian, this total jihadist mindset to their children, and it's doing it on our taxpayer dollars. And so that's another thing to think about
Just to
as
give
we
you
move forward.
on that point, you're absolutely right. Excuse me, a stunning statistic, Linda, is that one of the biggest um, educational operations in Texas uh, that has exploited massively this school choice program is something called the Harmony Schools, which is a subset of the Gulen movement. And they've got different names in different states, but it's basically all a well, a Turkish cult
Hmm.
founded by an imam by the name of Fethullah Gulen, who had a falling out with Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, moved to the United States and has massively penetrated the educational systems across the country, but most especially here in Texas. And I've been told by one of my colleagues in this campaign, Kristen Deering is her name. She's studied, the data that the Texas Comptroller's Office has produced about the taxpayer contributions to the Harmony schools going back, I don't know, 25 years or more, I think. It's about $4 billion. $4 billion. That's B. Oh boy, B. And that means that kids in Texas are being subjected not so much to, the direct frontal Sharia brainwashing and memorization and indoctrination, but they're getting it through a kind of back door in terms of the Harmony Schools Turkish supremacism.
Hmm.
And it gets you to the same place ultimately. It gets you to this stuff, this practice ultimately of jihad is normal
Hmm.
and unobjectionable and to be emulated. And the fact that Texas and I think to some extent federal taxpayers are, enabling this
Hmm.
is again an abomination. But unless it's challenged, unless people are awakened to it, not only will it continue, but it will metastasize. And we
It
mustn't let that happen.
We must not. And before we close, I do want to touch on the fact that before people think that this is just isolated to Texas, we have talked about how this is spread across the nation. The amount of mosques, and I encourage people to look. You have a website, bansharia.com, and you
Yes.
can learn a lot about what happens at the mosques. You can learn about Sharia law. You can learn about the whole history of this. So, listeners, please go to bansharia.com. But you will learn more than you want to know, actually. about You will learn things you wish you didn't have to know.
Yes.
But
But
this
you
is
do.
this is across the country, and places like Dearborn, Michigan. There's places in New Jersey. I mean, it is just everywhere. And now, even in New York, with what is happening in New York, we can't even
Mhm.
believe what's happening with the new mayor in New York. And, now I often
No, you ain't
ask,
seen nothing yet. They're just warming up, but
they're just, I mean,
they're going to be normalizing Sharia in New York in a big way. You already have the calls to prayer
yes, yes.
blasting out across the city now,
Explain what
five
that
times a
is,
day.
because so for people who have no idea, this, I know that in Minneapolis, where of course we've seen all the riots and all the unrest and things recently, but in Minneapolis they've had the calls to prayer. In New York they do now. There's, I think, in Dearborn they do, Dearborn,
Oh yeah.
Michigan, and then they have like communities. A
Mhm.
lot of places have communities, and these calls to prayer over our American cities. Could you imagine if we, like, let's just say we blasted the Lord's Prayer 5 times a day?
Yeah.
It would be that people
Yeah.
would
In
come
Mecca.
against it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
No.
this is really
Look,
horrible for
it
businesses,
is.
for
And what it
individuals.
is, just to be clear, it is a jihadist incantation.
Yes, it is.
Calling them to prayer, yes, but the prayer is to basically act on the appeal to Allah, their God, to, you know, rain destruction down on Christians and Jews.
Hmm.
And it's like halal food, which we're being forced to eat now
Yes.
because everything has to sort of standardize on the Muslim, food, which is, by the way, consecrated to Allah
Hmm.
and obtained from animals sacrificed for the purpose in the most inhumane manner possible. I
Hmm.
mean, it's just, again, in every respect, I have to say, you find that the most demonic character is being extolled. That would be Muhammad's. And the practices that he said were sacred and must be replicated by every faithful Muslim are the kind of thing that should rightly get you put in jail in the United States,
Mhm.
not given a pass, let
Right.
alone institutional protection, because it's just a religion. It's not a religion. It is an ideology of terror and conquest, the terror in the service of the conquest. And the more people learn, and I'm so glad you mentioned bansharia.com. We've got some very, very easily accessible, hard to read, yes, but nonetheless, you have a need to know what Sharia is and what its adherents intend to do to the rest of us, to make us submit to it. We don't want that to happen, not in Texas, not in Michigan, not anywhere in the United States, but it is. And this is the battleground now here in Texas. And we're going to fight hard for the next 2 weeks to see if this Proposition 10 on the Republican primary ballot can be overwhelmingly passed and begin a chain reaction, we hope, that will, start crawling back from the precipice that we're at with the essentially unimpeded efforts of Sharia supremacists to bring their totalitarian ideology to this country and make the rest of us submit to it.
I'm so glad you brought up the halal food as
Mm.
well. That was one of the things I wanted to just mention briefly. I know we're almost out of time, but I often ask the question if you were going to tell business owners how to explain the importance of this issue to their employees. Well, we can see right now, I've been reading a lot about how in these Muslim communities and the surrounding areas where we have these mayors who want to adhere to Sharia, where they want the foods all to be certified halal within a certain community, or you can't sell pork in certain
Mm.
communities, you can't sell tobacco in certain communities. So we don't think this is going to affect business. We don't think this is going to affect families everywhere. We
Yeah.
need to wake up because it is here, it is spreading, and it is something that everybody needs to be aware of. And just because, and I just want to talk to the listeners here, if this hasn't touched you yet, don't be so naive to think it won't, because it will. Or it will touch your family members. It will touch your business. It will impact you. It already has, just like what you said, Frank, with how our tax dollars are used. So just
It's your
simply,
children and your children's children, most
yes,
especially, that you've got to
yes,
be mindful of. And don't take our word for it. Watch what they're doing in Europe right
yes,
now,
yeah,
where 1 million girls, by some estimates, have been gang raped in Britain over
yes.
the past couple of decades, and the government has turned a blind eye to it, and they don't want any trouble with the Muslims, and
Mhm.
generally they're getting off more or less scot-free. It's an outrage.
It is.
But that is coming to America. In fact, there's evidence that there have been some rape gangs operating here already as well. We
Absolutely.
have to stop it,
Yeah,
folks.
we
You
don't
can
want a
play a
rape.
role at
Right.
bansharia.com. Find out
Yes,
how you can help. Make a
exactly.
contribution if you can to the fight. That would be appreciated too, but volunteer as well. There's stuff to be
Absolutely.
done now.
And I'd like people to know about the other website you have that. So if you want to tell them more about what else you do besides working with the bansharia.com effort here, but please give your other information if they want to reach out to you and learn more.
Sure, thank you. I do this television program, Securing America, on Real America's Voice, and you can find all of the programming and content that we produce there at securingamerica.substack.com. The other website for the Institute for the American Future is usfuture.org. And we would welcome your visit there and your support as well for the work
Right.
we do.
Well, thank you. And again, audience, please go to bansharia.com. And even if you happen to be viewing or listening to this podcast episode after the March 3rd election in Texas, uh, you can be sure that this issue is not going away. So this
Yeah.
will still be a timely issue, even if it's past this particular election date. So please educate yourselves, educate those you know, and don't turn a blind eye to this, because we want our Constitution to still be the law of our land that protects our God-given rights. And we have to protect our liberty. So thank you
Amen.
again, Frank Gaffney. Again, people can go to bansharia.com, and I look forward to having you back. And hopefully we can talk about some positive momentum we have in the other direction. So thank you, Frank.
Thank you so much, Linda. God bless you
God
and your
bless.
audience.
Thank you again for tuning in to this episode of the Prosperity 101 podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and give us a great review. Don't forget to visit prosperity101.com to sign our Employers Unleashed pledge, to access our entire podcast library, or to discover resources for use in your workplace. Let us know how we can serve you. Contact us today at prosperity101.com.